Good morning, afternoon. We're kind of talking to you from two different parts of the world. My name is David Goff, and I am trying out this new concept of creating a podcast. So, as I told you before, I'm going to have some of my friends on here from some of everywhere. I have some very eclectic group of friends from all over the world. And today we have the grand privilege of being in the presence of Miss Delmetria Mentor. I met her a long time ago as I was writing a book and looking to write some other books because she was coaching that type of thing and teaching that type of thing. She is a teacher. And as a matter of fact, she is teaching in Thailand. Is that
Thailand.
Correct? Okay, good.
Yes.
So, good evening to you. Good morning to me.
Good morning to you.
I am so happy to be able to do this. You know, we talked about it before, and we're looking at creating some other content, you know, in the future. And we're kind of set the groundwork for that. So today, I think we talked about, you know, you and I were saying, you know, my whole deal is mindset and thought processes of where people are. You are a teacher, and in being that, you deal with the youth of this country, that country, or wherever it is in the world you might be. So I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. Can you kind of give me some insight into what you do, how you do it, and some of the experiences you have where you are?
Yes. First, I'm a writer. I've been a writer much longer than I've been a teacher. I've been a writer for over 35 years, journalist, copywriter with some A-listers and some Fortune 500s and major publications. And in 2012, I decided to be a teacher. And I became a teacher because I thought it would slow me down, because as a writer, a freelance writer, I was always on the go. I was, you know, doing journalism, doing copywriting. I was always moving. Then my daughter got pregnant. My sons had already had kids, but you know, when it's boys, their girlfriends, mama deal with the kids. But with my daughter, I was like, okay, I'm gonna find a job that'll help me slow down and be a grandmother, and I can rock my grandchild in my rocking chair.
No, you wait
Well,
with your grandmother.
Well, I'm not that kind of granny, and he is not that kind of grandchild, and she is not that kind of mama. So that didn't work.
Right.
And then teaching certainly didn't slow me down. It just brought on shenanigans in a whole new different perspective and a different light in a different arena than I was used to. So I teach high school, and I've only been teaching, and I say only because for a lot of people, 10 years is a long time in any profession. But in the teaching world, that's like, you know, you just kind of still new almost.
Right.
So I've been teaching for 10 years, and in the US and here in Thailand. I teach English literature, English language, AP research, creative writing, and then general English 11 and 12. I have taught ninth graders before, but 11 and 12, advanced academics, IB, AP, that's my area. So teens here, teens there. Which one you want to know about first?
Well, I guess we'll talk about the ones here in the U.S. first, since that's where we are, and probably a lot of the people who will see this will be here in the U.S. also. So as far as when we talk about differences, let's first talk about, you know, the years that you have been doing what you do, that you have been writing and teaching and working with the youth. How have you seen the mindset change from probably when you started to now? I mean, how have kids changed? I know technology has changed, so on and so forth. I'm sure that has had an effect. So how has there been a change in the youth here, and what is the mindset that you see with them right now?
The mindset that I see is the same all over the world. They want everything quick, fast, and in a hurry. A lot of teens don't have patience anymore. They don't really value. Now, in the US, I would say they don't appreciate. I won't say that they don't value, but they don't appreciate what they're getting from education.
Okay.
That's the biggest takeaway, I think, with teenagers in the US. And on top of that, whether they are middle class, upper middle class, even lower class, they have a lot of responsibility as teenagers, a lot of responsibility. So there's no wonder that they can't really focus in
What do you
school.
mean by that? A lot of responsibility. What do you
When I was in the US, I don't think I taught a teenager who did not work a part-time job. Some of them worked full-time, who didn't have the responsibility of paying their own bills as far as like a car note or their car insurance, or at least their cell phone bill. They bought their own clothes, and like I said, this is across all socioeconomic backgrounds, whether they're poor, middle class, upper class, they had those responsibilities. A lot of teenagers had to rush home to babysit younger siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Some had to rush home to take care of aging grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Some had to sometimes take care of their parents who were either, substance abuse or some kind of codependency. The teenagers had to go and deal with all that.
Really? Is that something new?
In addition to
it's always
schoolwork.
been that?
I think it's always been that because, again, I've been teaching 10 years, and in the real world, 10 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started, I was devastated. I was shocked at, my first 5 months of teaching, I taught ninth graders, and even my ninth graders had those levels of responsibility.
Really?
And it was across 9 to 12.
Right. I think a lot of people's mindsets today is that these kids are lazy, or that they're not focused because they have so many things with the internet and the media, the TikTok and all this kind of thing, that they are just completely irresponsible in not doing this. But what I'm hearing from you is that they're taking on some responsibilities.
The thing is, again, in my experience, education is the only industry that has not kept up with the evolution of time. Like within the last maybe 5 years, education is just now catching up with technology, with the whole STEM push and STEAM push.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are just going, really, really crazy about too much screen time is Zoom, and it's, they're always on Zoom, and Zoom teaching is not effective. I don't believe that at all, because my Zoom teaching is just as effective as my classroom teaching. And that's because of what I do or I do not allow with my students. Plus, I incorporate technology in my class. When I'm doing things like bell ringers or like trying to teach thesis statements, you have to send me that in a text or on Twitter, because Twitter only gives you so many characters. And if you can't get a thesis statement in a tweet, then it's too much. It's too long. It's not what I just taught you. So we got to go back and do that again, And so I think because education, and then some schools won't even allow cell phones in the classroom. Like, you'll walk into a class and you'll see this thing on the wall, and it's like little slots, almost look like those portable shoe things that you put your shoes in. We don't have room. Well, they have those for cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder who's coming up with these ideas, who's coming up with these rules, because
Right.
Adults cannot even sit in a meeting or a workshop for longer than 10 to 15 minutes without checking Facebook or email or Instagram or a tweet. So how do we expect children to be off technology for at least 8 hours a day?
So
it just doesn't make sense to me.
Do you think that continual access to technology is a good thing?
I don't necessarily think it's a good thing, but it's a real thing. And so you either, as my grandmother used to say, and I won't say it since we're recording, you either or get off the pot.
Right. Okay.
And so when I think about technology, I think about when televisions and telephones and all that stuff first came about. People, they weren't excited about it. A lot of people didn't have televisions because they thought that was from the devil. A lot of people, when lights and electricity came about, they didn't want that because they thought it was putting something in their brains.
Right.
But you adjust. You have to adjust. You when you figure out that it's not going anywhere, you have to figure out how to live with it.
Right.
And it's just, like I said, it may not be a good thing, but it's reality.
So we're talking about it from an educational perspective, but what about from a social interactive perspective? I mean, if kids are learning on, the computer, how does that affect their ability to have interpersonal relationships, even be able to communicate effectively with a live human being in front of them?
It's challenging. I think it's challenging, but again, it's real. And it's not just kids who are having to make those adjustments. It's adults too.
Right.
So I think somebody is going to have to come up with a way. I mean, a good example, tomorrow, my sister is doing a game night, but it's a virtual game night because we're from Louisiana. So she has friends that she went to Grambling with, friends from Louisiana, people in Texas, and then I'm here. So this game night is virtual. And so that's a way to still include your friends in something social. And I haven't done it yet, so it might not be the best way, but it is a way.
Right.
And then sometimes you can have events where no cell phones are allowed for a certain amount of time, but especially for teenagers, they really have to be engaged. You're going to have to come up with something. They can't just sit there and say, okay, go mingle with everybody. You got to give them discussion prompts to talk about. You have to give them activities to do. You have to keep them busy because, again, it's not just teenagers in this world that's having to deal with these changes. It's adults too.
But
so they're doing what they see us do.
Some of us who are not teens have had the, for lack of a better term, home training. We have the groundwork set for some type of social skills. What I'm seeing when I see these kids is it doesn't seem like they have the fundamentals or the groundwork of how to engage somebody in a face-to-face scenario. Some things that I feel should be normal, like the pleases and the thank yous. Like if you walk into a room and people are already there, you speak. If you're leaving, you tell everybody you're leaving. But those basics don't seem to be there. And
now I'm not saying that that's the school's responsibility to do that.
No,
however, if that doesn't exist at home, just think about it. When you were growing up, I'm sure you knew some kids who, if they didn't have shoes or if they didn't have shirts or whatever, a teacher gave it to them. And again, that's not the school's responsibility, but what I do think is the school's responsibility is to keep up with the times. I have a nonprofit organization called Teen Writers Project, and we created a magazine. We have the TWP Quarterly, a lit zine that we publish every month. But I also do leadership training. So for my teen editorial board, if you're on my board as an intern or a volunteer, you have to do these training modules to know how to be a leader. Well, I'm also getting ready to launch our the Writers Academy training program. The Writers Academy is going to teach teenagers how to write for corporations right now, instead of waiting until they graduate. And so I said that to say schools need to do the same thing. We're still teaching the same old curriculum that catered to our generation and generations before. There needs to be soft skills need to be taught in school. In my classroom, there's certain things that I don't allow just because I am of a certain age. So when you come into my classroom, you do have to speak.
Right.
When you come into my classroom in the US, you cannot have a do-rag on your head. You cannot sag, you cannot do all that. But at the same time, I do think there need to be courses like financial literacy. We need that in schools right now. Money management, we need that. I guess that's part of financial literacy, but knowing how to work in corporate America, etiquette, business etiquette, professional etiquette. We need that in schools right now.
Entrepreneurism.
Entrepreneurship, yep. We
Yeah.
need that in schools right now because, at first it was just reading, writing, arithmetic.
Right.
Then when I first started teaching, they came up with this college and career readiness.
Mm-hmm.
But they forgot about the military. They forgot about entrepreneurship. They forgot about freelancing. Those are real things in the real world. So why aren't we teaching this in school if our role as educators is to prepare kids for the future?
Right.
Because everybody doesn't go to college. And that doesn't mean that you won't be successful these days if you don't go to college.
Right.
I still encourage all my students to go to college, but they don't feel like they even have the tools to even apply or know how to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
So why aren't schools teaching those things?
Right. I agree with everything that you're saying. And, I also hope that if there are any parents listening, that they take advantage of this information and find ways to fill that gap for themselves, for their children. Because
I can tell them how.
we're gonna have all your information. I'm gonna get it from you, and we're gonna put it at the end of this video so people can have it, because you're doing some amazing stuff, and I want to make sure we let everybody know. So, being a teacher, and I know that you're not in the U.S. right now, I have to ask you this whole question about this critical race theory. What do you think about that?
I wish you had a bleep button so that you could bleep out what I want to say. But I think it's BS.
I do too.
I really think it's BS. I think it's BS because, again, if schools are not teaching students and children about us when the parents can't, who's going to teach it?
Right.
And it's not even about needing to teach, any one particular race or anything like that, but how come Black people aren't included in that curriculum? How come Native Americans aren't included except for the occasional Rosa Parks story, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? We know all those people. What about the people they don't know?
Right. I feel like history is history, period.
Yeah, history is history, period.
If you want to write a story where you're always the hero, no matter what you've done, that's not history. That's your story. It's not our story.
Right.
Right.
Now, one thing I can say, one thing I will say, a friend of mine is a DEI expert. She travels the world, Risha Grant, talking about diversity and inclusion. And at her last presentation, I think she was speaking at Samsung.
Mm-hmm.
A white woman came up to her afterwards and she said, I don't know what to tell my son. I don't know how to help my son. Because his school is a PWI, predominantly white institution. And he's in middle school. He's a 7th grader. Mm-hmm. His school has a really big push for Black Lives Matter and talking about, Black books, Black people, really trying to be inclusive and all that. And the white kid said that it's fine. He loves learning about different cultures, and because it's not just Black Lives Matter, he's learned about Indian culture and Hispanics and Native Americans and Mexicans, everybody. He's fine with that. But the question he asked was, but where do I fit in? Where does my history fit in? Because some schools are trying so hard to prove that, oh yeah, we pro-Black and we power to the Black people, that they're forgetting that they still need to teach those classics. They still need to teach about some white history. Now, I'm saying white history because, like you just said, it's all history.
Right.
But
we need to teach the truth about it, not the stuff we've been fed for generations.
Right. And so I think even as Black people, we have to be careful too, because all of this cancer culture and like every time I post about Dr. Seuss, I will never stop posting about Dr. Seuss, because many times throughout my life, I've written that I am the poet that I am because of Dr. Seuss.
That's what
now his views
reading.
And his opinions.
Yeah, those were my books in the beginning.
I don't care what his views were. As a child, I only knew about the fun things that I saw in his literature, in his work. Now, he did come out and say that, he was not a racist, but during the time he started writing in the end of the 30s, beginning of the 40s. And he said he was a young man with a family and he needed a job. So he created those political cartoons, being assigned those things by an editor that he had no control over. And they were, the Jewish commentary and Black commentary and all that, but he needed a job. And where do you go in the 40s to not write about those things? Because everybody was writing that way in the 40s. But people are still holding that against this man 70-something years later.
I really don't see judging a person by today's standards when they lived in a completely different era. I mean, I set up and watch, if you were a fan of like Eddie Murphy at all, the thing he did in Delirious and Raw would not go over at all. Not go over
not at all.
So I don't see that. I don't see judging somebody by today's standards for behavior back when they were coming along, because, we evolve, culture evolves.
Exactly.
And we need to be true to that evolution by speaking to it. But then you go and you say, well, back in the day, slavery was okay. Okay, but tell about it truthfully. Tell about it truthfully.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
I
agree.
Don't commemorate somebody and build statues to them and sing songs about them when they weren't what you say they were. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I'm just not a fan. When they were talking about taking all the statues down and stuff, I wasn't really a fan of that, because I say leave the statue up, but add a plaque
to the truth.
Right. Because that's
we're on the same page.
Yeah.
We are on the same page. Yeah. That's exactly how I felt. I did not agree with taking those statues down because, again, those things, those ideologies, those notions, those were signs of the time. And these people really thought that they were being God-fearing and God-loving by doing the things that the country said you should or is okay to do.
Right.
Do you write that? Yeah, like you said, put that on a plaque.
Right.
Don't take it down, because now you're trying to erase even that history. And you need all of that to especially to teach kids how to be well-rounded in their thinking.
Right.
How to be informed in their decisions and that they make. And one thing that I wanted to say before we completely get off the topic about what schools need to teach. Many times a student will learn something in school and then take it home. And a big example of that, one of the biggest examples of that, and I think it was life-changing for this entire family, is Tabitha Brown. Tabitha Brown's daughter, Choice, I think that's her name, had watched What the Health at school. And she came home and told her mom that at school or something that they were having like a 7-day or whatever month-long vegan challenge. And at the time, Tabitha Brown was in a debilitating situation. She had chronic headaches. She could barely move. She could barely walk. She was sick. But because this was Choice's school project, she said, okay, they watched it again together. And she said, okay, I'll do it. After 7 days, she started feeling a little bit better. So they kept going and kept going. And you know what and who Tabitha Brown is now. It's because of what her daughter learned at school.
Right.
And so one thing that I do want, if parents are watching, is for them to know, it's not, to me, there's not a responsibility to the parents to solely to teach their children everything, because they don't know everything. And it's not the school's responsibility. It is a partnership.
Right.
In Africa, they didn't have that it takes a village proverb for no reason. It does take a village. There's no separation when it comes to what we should learn at home and school, because the experts aren't at home. And then sometimes the mothers are not at school. So it's a partnership. So we need to learn about all of this stuff. We need to learn about white people. We need to learn about Black people and everybody in between, from school and from home. Right. Because if you think about it, if we rely on parents to teach us everything, to teach their children everything, they can only teach them what they know.
Right.
And if they don't know, I have some white friends now who heavily rely on me and some of our mutual Black friends to tell them, is this okay if I say this to my child or allow my child to do, because they are trying to do better. And I don't think it's just white people who need to do better. I think everybody needs to do better.
Right. And most of the ills that we have in our society come from ignorance.
That's it. That's where it comes from.
Just straight up ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess one of the other things I want to mention, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of generational change or progression. I don't know, when you were a kid, whether Saturdays y'all cleaned the house while the radio played or whatever type of thing. That seems to be a thing amongst a lot of Black families. And today we seem, I know we went through the era of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s where so much of lifestyle change, so much drugs going into some communities, the coming about of all the technology, so on and so forth. So you end up having generations of children whose parents weren't raised too well. So like you say, they can't teach them a lot of things, or they got addicted to drugs, so on and so forth. And I think in this whole progression, previously you talked about Africa and other things. And even here in the culture here in America, there used to be rites of passage, where a kid can say, hey, I'm officially an adult, or I'm officially a teenager, I'm officially this, and you knew what that meant. And that progression gave you at every step more responsibilities, or more expected a greater level of awareness of you. Today, we have basically what I'm seeing is kind of nothing. We just go along and we're just here. Now, figure it out and get it done. What's your perspective on that?
One, I agree. I think that's exactly what's happened. Because it's just like I talked about before. We don't have things in place to teach our kids what we don't know. Like, I'm gonna tell you, David, when my kids were little, I used to cry all the time because I just never, ever thought, I never imagined that the way my life was at that time would ever end. Because as parents, we got up early Saturday morning. Our kids had to clean up. They had to clean up everything. Then we had to be on a football field. We had to be on a basketball court. We had to be on a track field. And it wasn't just, okay, I'm going to send you with your coach. It was our entire family. And the way my husband and I were involved, my husband they played Pop Warner. They have a lot of coaches. He was one of their coaches. I was a cheer mom because we had one daughter. She was only 4 at the time. When my daughter became a Girl Scout, guess who her Girl Scout leader was? Her mama.
Right.
So we were involved with our kids. But a lot of times today, I think it wasn't talked about as much when he was coming up. What's the guy, the Apple man? What's his name? Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs. Wasn't talked about as much. But when Mark Zuckerberg came out and that Facebook movie came out and all these other things came out, young people discovered that you don't have to go to college to be rich. And that seems to be the focus for not just teenagers today, but America, period. How do you get that bag?
Right.
That's all everybody is worried about.
Mm.
Elon Musk, right now, today, he is just flaunting his wealth with his chest stuck out saying, I can afford to buy Twitter. And you're going to force somebody to sell you something that's not even up for sale.
Right.
But that's the way of the world right now. Everybody is all about the money. And so if we're not creating organizations like mine, or creating organizations like art therapy and things like that for teenagers to have something to do on Saturdays, besides have a phone in their face all day, a laptop in their face all day, or just sitting around doing nothing, to go back to the question you asked, that is how we foster those social relationships. That's how they interact with each other socially, because they get up on Saturdays and they do stuff.
Right.
Even as far as religion goes, not everybody is Christian, not everybody is really into religion these days.
Right.
So families are not going to church like they used to, or the mosque, or the temple, or however they worship. They're not doing that as a family anymore, because it seems there's no importance on that, because again, some people have to work on Sundays. Some teenagers have to work on Sundays. That's when they do their homework. That's when they do all of this stuff. So who has time to go to go worship?
Yeah, I can relate, because when my kids were growing up, I was the one that was there the whole time. I was the assistant coach or the coach, or, not just taking them and dropping them off. When my daughter was 4 years old, took her to the Y for some swimming classes. And I was already of a mind that I never dropped my kids off with anybody. And if I had not been there, this little young lady at the Y would have let my daughter drown.
Oh, no.
I actually jumped off the bleachers, ran around the fence, dived in the pool, and got my daughter before she could get to it.
Wow.
Okay.
Dang. That was a lot.
Yeah, right. And if something had happened to her, we probably wouldn't be talking today. At least me, I would probably be talking from a jail cell, but it was
from the pen.
It's just that kind of thing. Parents have to be involved with their kids. Parents can't think that that's a free time, that they've got a babysitter for that period of time and they can let their kids go. And it's important not only to protect them, but also to build a relationship with their child, to let that child know that I'm here. I'm here.
Right.
And if you're there, you will discipline your kid and teach them the social skills as they interact with kids who don't have them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. You're absolutely right. And then once they see them acting like they have some sense, then they will too.
Right.
But you're right. We don't have that. And one of the reasons we don't have that is because, like I said, parents are working on Sundays and on Saturdays. And so it's not good, but some parents need to use those things as babysitters because they don't have anything else to do with their children. So they do have to drop them off. All of that needs to be changed. Kids and education can't change that. I don't know what can change that, but I know that needs to be addressed at least in the world.
I was just about to tell you before we end this conversation, I'm going to give you the power right now. The power is invested in you right now to solve all this and change it. What are you going to do?
First of all, I'm going to cry because that's a huge task.
It is.
That's a huge task. But I know on a small scale, you start small. If every adult could involve themselves or create some kind of organization or some kind of club or program for a child, that's a start. That's a start. Okay. I mean, that's exactly the only reason I started my organization is because it didn't exist.
Right.
You know, I always say that writing is my sport. But when I was a teenager, I didn't have a coach.
Right.
And that's how it is for teenagers now. Like, if you want to write. Now, athletes at school, they have coaches. The orchestra, the band, they have band leaders. Theater, they have people. All of that. But writers don't have anybody.
Right.
They have to go from wanting to write in, middle school, elementary school. They become teenagers. There's no writing, creative writing in schools. The only thing they're writing for is for the drill and kill of test prep, which is boring and uninteresting to a teen.
Right.
And then after that, the thrill is gone. And so I wanted to create something for those teen writers. So if an adult would say, okay, what do I like to do that I didn't have an opportunity to do when I was a kid? Or what did I do when I was a kid that I loved doing that I don't see now?
Right.
Let me start that. Well, one of my biggest goals is to open, when I get back to the US, I want to open a skating rink.
Okay.
Because we used to skate every single week when I was growing up. My 50th birthday party was at a skating rink.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But nobody's doing that.
Right. Do you think, I think there's been a trend going back that way, because I've seen more and
Mhm.
more younger people, 30 and below, doing videos and stuff in skating rinks. So I think the culture is kind of going back that way a little bit. Uh,
Yeah.
I guess my only question would be, we're back to that whole thing about social interaction. You know how things can be in certain neighborhoods where, I
Right.
started this an art program for young boys who had been in trouble with the law, for the sole purpose of, I didn't feel they had a way to effectively communicate. So if you upset them or hurt their feelings, they didn't have any choice but to kill you, or
Right.
take on some kind of physical
Right.
violence. So I'm hoping that this trend is changing, and that it is requiring these young people to have some social skills, some patience, some ability to interact and communicate. And I think that's a great idea. And I think not only just having the skating rink, but probably having some programs that go on there too,
Oh yeah,
that work
definitely.
on those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
see.
that's like I said earlier. You can't just send them to the wolves. You got to have engaging activities for them to do.
Right,
At the skating rink, you have to have adults who will monitor and not sit there on their phones, just looking at their phones, um, or let a kid, not paying attention and let a kid almost drown in a pool. You have to have, again, it goes back to, it takes a village.
right.
She shouldn't have been the only person in that pool, you know?
Yeah,
That you can't just, okay, I decide I want to open up a skating rink and I'm so busy at the ticket counter that I don't see anything that's going. No, you need people out there. Let me show you how to skate. Let me
right,
show you how to go backwards. Let me show you how to do this. Let's have a dance. We used to do the hokey pokey. We used to do all kind of stuff, because we knew that people were watching.
right,
And
right.
kids they don't have that fear. And now you can't whoop a kid. You can't do this. You can't do that. They don't have fear for anything anymore.
Right.
So
Right.
it'll be difficult, but I think it's doable.
Right. Well, I want to thank you. We didn't keep a time
So
clock
welcome.
or anything and set limitations. Uh, Dale, I am so glad that I met you many, many moons ago, and that we have been able to keep
Oh,
in
thank
touch,
you.
that we've been
Me
able to keep
too.
in touch, because I really value this relationship and look forward to doing some things with you in the future.
Me
I
too.
want you to just briefly kind of tell us about the organizations that you have going on and what you're doing. And what I'll do is I'll get that information from you later on, and we'll actually have it written on the screen before we
Okay.
post this. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay. My organization is called Teen Writers Project, and we provide a collaborative and engaging space for teens to write, be published, and get paid. And that's it in a nutshell. We publish a magazine. We have a teen reflection journal. We do workshops in schools, workshops in the community. And right now in June, I won't say right now, but starting in June, I'll actually be doing virtual workshops with teenagers at Promise House and at the Henry Wade Justice Center in Dallas. So
Okay,
I'm looking forward to that.
good deal. I'm looking forward to you being back in the States.
Me
Yeah,
too.
I think we're going to be able to do some things together in the near future.
I
Um,
hope so.
Thanks again. What's the weather like in Thailand over there today?
Hot all the time.
Hot all the
They
time.
only they only have one season and it's hot year round.
Was there a
But yeah,
rainy
so
season too?
we're in the rainy season now. The rainy season is from April to October. So it's gonna rain like almost every day,
Right,
heavily during that time. But the country needs it because it's really dry. Because
right,
we are so close to the equator.
right, right. Thanks for educating us. That's something we didn't know.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And yeah, the education is key, and life experience is key too. Just the fact that you moved
Yeah,
to Thailand, let somebody else know that that's a possibility for them, and that they
yeah,
won't disappear, and they won't have to go with whatever propaganda that they hear about other countries from a
right.
U.S. perspective, and I think that's a great deal, a great deal.
Me too.
Well, it was
Now,
good talking to you,
you
and
too.
you have a great rest of your evening. I know it's evening there, so you have a great rest of your evening, and
Ten
hope
fifteen.
we'll get a chance to talk again soon.
We will.
All
Thank
right.
you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Bye.